Can you travel to Slovenia with diabetes? Absolutely. Slovenia is a small European country tucked between Italy, Croatia, and Hungary, but it's full of very old historical towns, gorgeous Alpine mountains, and lots of really good food. Be smart and be careful, and diabetes won't stop you. Hi, I'm still Jeremy. Here's my personal blood sugar report from 9 days in Slovenia. My blood sugar stats were not exactly great in Slovenia, but I did see some positive signs. In total, there were 44 checks and the readings ranged from 63 to 392. The average was 196. That 63 was the only reading below 70 the entire time. But there were only 2 readings the whole time in Slovenia that were over 300. Compared with some of the recent countries, that's much better. But overall, there were too many readings in the 200s. Slovenia was a constant battle. In my videos on this channel, I always mention how important exercise and food are to my blood sugar levels. That's true in Slovenia just like everywhere else, but the food in Slovenia seemed to offset any gains in blood sugars. And that was despite some really good days full of exercise, like hiking up to Ljubljana Castle or Ptuj Castle, or walking around Lake Bled, or strolling through the endless alleyways of Piran. Things got off to a rough and weird start right away. After the train from Hungary arrived in Ptuj, can you tell this was in December? My blood sugar was 86. Dinner was pizza and my readings afterwards were 110 and then after some juice, 103. But then at 6 a.m. I woke up feeling bad because I was 392. I was so groggy I forgot to get a picture of it. I took some Humalog, but later at breakfast I was still 232. Then, despite the big in-room breakfast, I was down to 71 by afternoon. Things were up and down like that much of the time. Luckily, all of this diabetic volatility didn't make Slovenia any less beautiful or interesting. It's such a hidden little gem of a country, full of surprises and captivating places to find yourself. For instance, I took one of my favorite diabetes travel-related photos ever from the castle overlooking this town. As I say, it was the food in Slovenia that seemed to wreck my readings. I wasn't eating as much junk food as usual, no dinners of crackers and chocolate milk from the local corner store. Instead, it was mostly restaurants, all of which were pretty great. Even Paul McCartney ate in this one with his then-wife Heather, and I don't recall them complaining. But whether it was pasta, fish, fried seafood, or breakfasts in the hotels and guest houses, and yes, some cinnamon rolls and stuff for the buses and trains, the food almost always sent me into the mid-200s. It got pretty frustrating, actually. After a string of annoyingly high readings, one day I walked all the way around Lake Bled, one of Central Europe's most famous views. By the time I was finished, I was 106, and here's where you can overthink diabetes. I thought I might still be dropping due to the exercise, so I had a chocolate bar. That made me 196, and then, despite the simplicity of my dinner, I was 239 before bed. And by the way, these high readings usually surprise me. I kept thinking I might be low, and then this. But there was another side to all of this irritating high blood sugar. Almost as often, it was better than expected. Morning readings were often pretty good, and for every couple of high numbers, there were a couple that I could live with. Those are the ones that give you hope, and those were the ones that kept me focusing on my Humalog shots at meals and forever chasing that elusive dragon. No, not that dragon. That dragon. At least half the time in Slovenia, diabetes and travel sparred as usual, meaning things were unpredictable but worth trying. It wasn't Slovenia's fault that I didn't know how to calculate a dose for mulled hot wine and gigantic hamburgers from the Christmas market in the capital, Ljubljana. But when you're in a festive place like this, with the lights and merry crowds and live music and food stalls, diabetes is merely something to factor in, not an excuse to shy away from the fun. So I turned a pre-dinner 99 into a pre-bed 293. What can I say? At least I joined the Slovenian festivities, and I was glad I did it. And hey, the next morning I was back on track, ready for a hike up to the castle and a better day of blood sugars. And views. It was only the beer and takeout noodles that proved higher in carbs than I'd thought. Perfectly understandable. In Piran, an amazing place on the coast I'd never even heard of, my blood sugars were especially dire. Despite the hiking around town and zipping up and down the steps and hills and alleyways, there were way too many readings in the 200s. Then again, the one low I had in Slovenia, the 63, happened here. And there was the occasional acceptable number here and there, of course. As we sat at an outdoor restaurant in Piran, having a Lashko beer and watching the sun setting over the Adriatic Sea, I reflected on the positivity I could detect in my Slovenian blood sugars. The highs were numerous, but not as high as before, and only 2 in the 300s. There were more readings in the 100s than in recent countries. There was still work to be done, but I was chipping away at my understanding of how to see and experience this part of Europe as a diabetic. Things were getting better, and while the various factors that affect blood sugar, exercise, food, sleep, stress, were still up in the air, they were starting to fall into place. Thanks for watching. Next is Croatia, where I had what would be my highest blood sugar of the entire 4-month trip, but where things kept steadily improving overall. Check out my other videos for travel tips, stories from my own travels, and my experiences as a type 1 diabetic wanderer. See you on the road.